I want to move to the next part because I want to make sure we don't delay getting to your clients today. And so I'm going to ask that you keep the questions until the end of this last segment before we do the application exercise. What we're going to do now is design what we call CABs. CABs are contextually appropriate behaviors. Please know we're not trying to just make up language. It's just we need a word that captures with generality what we're doing in this phase, and compliance is not good enough, and compliance is kind of an unfortunate word to a lot of listeners. And so we call them contextually appropriate behaviors. That simply means we're going to teach behaviors where they used to engage in problem behavior, what should they have done? So when you take away a child's iPad and say it's time to work and they have a meltdown, what's the CAB? So I'm going to ask you it one more time. When you ask someone to turn off their iPad and put it away and come to the table and do work and they have a meltdown, that teaches us, right now we know what the first CAB chain is going to be. What is it going to be? What we want that child to do is learn to hand over his iPad with a smile. What we want that child to do is get his butt over to the table and sit and get ready to learn. What we want that child to do is do the work. That's the CAB. Do you see what I mean? So if the problem is, every time I try to relinquish their iPad to do discrete trials, there's a problem. Well, you know what the CAB is. Relinquish your iPad, transition to do the work, and do the work like a champ. That's CAB. Every time we are transitioning in the hallway and going to phys ed, the social climate is too much for the child. That's when the problem behavior happens. What's the CAB? Transitioning to the gym and engaging in physical education. So again, the interview tells you what your contextually appropriate behaviors are going to be. Parents say the biggest issue is turning off the video games and coming to the dinner table. What's the CAB? Turning off the video game, transitioning to the dinner table, and having a delightful meal with their family. So there's no mystery here about what the CABs are. There's no creativity needed. The interview tells you what the CABs are going to be. We pick one to start with. Okay, here we go. The first thing we're going to do is try to gain instructional control, always over relinquishing one's reinforcers. So if it's giving up the iPad, or maybe it's stopping from wandering, or maybe it's quieting the body for someone who's engaging in self-stimulatory behavior. Okay, so that's CAB 1, pretty much for all kids. Stop doing what you're doing, or give me that good thing, or pause that video game. That's CAB 1. Here's some examples. So as we talk after the break and we design processes for you guys, you're going to give specifics to what's the CAB 1 going to be for your learner, and it's going to sit within this structure, this category of giving up their reinforcers or stopping what they're doing. So what does it look like in the process? It looks like this. We stand up, they say, excuse me, yes, may I have my way, please? We're going to reinforce that sometimes, but more than half the time we're going to say no. They're going to say, okay, no problem. We're going to reinforce that sometimes, but most of the time we're going to say, good. Pause your iPad, put it over there. They pause their iPad, put it over there. We're going to say, that was great. Let's go back to your way. That's CAB 1. We're not going to the table yet. We're just reinforcing, relinquishing your reinforcers, turning it in, pausing it, stopping what you're doing, etc. Okay. Then what we're going to do is gain instructional control over transitioning. All kids, everybody has, I used to write transition programs. Again, it's all built into this one process. I am a one-trick pony. Let me take a side note here. I participate in IEPs still to this day, every now and then, but I used to do it more often. When the IEP is done, the guy has 20 goals or something, 20 objectives. And we're working on them in folders. Different professionals are working on different objectives, and they're folderized, so we've got 10 trials happening over here and 10 trials happening over here. My preference is for all the goals, and they can be done, all the goals to be worked on simultaneously in the same process. That's what this affords you. Think about the learner. Do they have language goals? Got it. Do they have social emotional goals? Got it. Do they have problem behavior reduction goals? It's here. Do they have academic goals? Throw it in. Do they have transition issues, transition goals? Put it here. One process. Put all your IP goals, stack them in. Okay, it's not segmented. It's a little bit more connected way to teach the learner the things that we have segmented through our conversations and the way we structure IEPs. Okay, so again, CAB 2, gain instructional control over the transition. Here are some examples. If the learner has really good language, we might give a compound prompt. Thank you for pausing your iPad. Go to the table and get ready to learn. With other kids, we might say, thank you for pausing your iPad. Stand up. Very nice. Walk over here. Super. Have a seat. Excellent. Get ready to learn. So you can segment the prompts, or you can give a compound prompt. Let the learner teach you which one is necessary. Okay. Then we're going to gradually increase the amount of behavior required to terminate the delay. Gradually increase the amount of behavior to terminate the delay. So now we're moving on to CAB 3. CAB 3 means we're going to finally, at the table, have the child do something. CAB 3 mainly means do one thing correctly in the beginning, and we stretch it to 1, 2, or 3. The chain is very short, because what we're going to work on with CAB 3 is perfection. We're going to try to shape a beautiful, ready-to-learn repertoire, a beautiful listener repertoire. We're going to try to remove stereotypy from the teaching lesson. We're going to try to remove chair tipping, looking around for other reinforcers, twiddling the materials. When a child effectively transitions to the table and gets ready to learn, let's keep it simple. There's a matching program. There's this one sample, 3 comparisons. I'm just looking for one perfect response. I say match. The child takes the thing. I got to redirect them back to it, and then they match correctly. Do I reinforce? The answer is no. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to say match again, match. And they take it and they go, my way? I said, no. And then they match. Do I reinforce? No. And I take another card. I'm looking for one perfect trial. One trial where they take the sample, look at the comparisons, put it on there without interrupting stereotypy, without turning towards the reinforcer, which is the most common one where we got this 2-table thing going on. They love to just look at the reinforcers. I want you focused here. Give me one perfect response. They give you one perfect, you go back and you reinforce that. So where are we now? Either reinforcing communication, toleration, giving up their iPad, in this case, transitioning, doing one thing correct. We're going to intermittently and unpredictably reinforce those things. Hope is alive that any of those responses could yield reinforcement. When you go to the table, it doesn't mean you do 10 things. Right? When you go to the table, it doesn't mean you participate in a whole lesson. Just give me one perfect thing. Then you stretch it to 1, 2, or 3 perfect things. The beauty of this is as you recycle, they match and they engage in stereotypy and you ask them to do another, it's not like you're alerting to them that you're stretching it. You're not alerting to them that they failed, that they made a mistake. There's no battle here. It's just you are differentially reinforcing clean chains of behavior. And we're doing it without language, without response cost, without acknowledgement of the problems. Just let differential reinforcement work for you. At the end of CAB 3, this is really the goal, and I strongly recommend do not hustle to CAB 4 until you get this. The child should look very different at the table than they look in reinforcement. In reinforcement, they should look as autistic as the day you met them. Now, I really mean that. They should look as just, they are who they are and who they want to be. That's what they look like in reinforcement. In the EO, when they're at the table, they should kind of be indistinguishable from their same age peers. That's what we're moving them towards. Just quiet body, quiet hands, focus. They do a couple trials. They check in with you. They go back to my way. Last tip for CAB 3. Don't reinforce the compliant act immediately. Sounds a little weird. So you want one perfect match. Or let's say you want three in a row. They do one, nice. 2, nice. 3, nice. As soon as they do the third one, our inclination is going to be, nice, go play your way. But I want to ask you to consider, before you leave cab 3, to do something better. And the better is this. After they respond on the third one, don't reinforce, just pause. They'll fill the pause with a check-in with you. When they check in with you, then provide the reinforcer. We want kids to basically ask for permission to leave the table. Kids are going to get really dialed into the temporal nature of these things, and they're going to go like 1, 2, 3, boom, take off. We're dealing with impulsivity here. We want kids to basically trust us and check in with us and essentially ask for permission. So this is what it'll look like if you don't reinforce the match, but instead you reinforce the match, pause, check-in. It'll look like this. Match. Oh, yeah, okay. Tells me to match. I do another one. I look. You say match. And then you say your way. Now I go. Do you see what I mean? You're getting a nice observing response. You're getting the child ready to learn. They're checking in with you because hope's alive, because when they check in with you, there's a probability that you're going to say, go back to your way. And there's also a possibility you're going to say, do another one, or simply match. Getting the check-in, when we consult with people, the people that stay in cab 3 and get those nice quiet bodies and those ready-to-learn responses and get this check-in thing going, they fly through the rest of this process. If you don't get that, you're kind of stuck with some sloppy, not quite ready-to-learn repertoire that's going to always get in the way of what we're trying to do later in this process. Okay, a couple questions. We have one from Emily.
So you were saying, initially you're not reinforcing anything other than that really being responsible. We're only trying to do maybe 1 up to 3 responses. So if you're not getting those key responses, each time,
quick enough.
How often do you, at what point do you just then reinforce an imperfect response or something?
Excellent. You want to be careful of strain. You let the child teach you. If you're trying to shape, and on 2 consecutive trials, you see some precursor behavior, we're pushing too hard. 2 trials. This is a process where every trial teaches you what to do on the next trial a little bit better, okay? This is shaping, and differential reinforcement is the core of shaping. And you got to figure out what your differential reinforcement contingency is going to be placed on. Now, if you have a new learner, an emerging learner, that engages in wild forms of stereotypy, vocal and object and body, and they're constantly looking at their reinforcers, and they tip their chair, I'd say pick one. Work on not chair tipping. Do you see what I'm saying? And then get them accurate without chair tipping, accurate without chair tipping, and orienting towards their reinforcers. And add to the list. You'll notice on the data sheet, there's some trial area for us to circle things and slash things, but then there's a whole bunch of white space at each step. And that's because we leave that there so we can write in our new requirements. And you can see the shaping unfold. So for some kids, you can just have you can put a lot of those things into your contingency from the get-go because you can instruct it. You can say, listen, Sam, on this trial, I want you to have a quiet body, quiet mouth, and I want you to match like a champ. And you can instruct a few things. For some learners, they're totally irrelevant. So you just have to shape. You have to use it with differential reinforcement. I wouldn't put more than 1 factor into your contingency at a time so you don't push too hard, okay, and get trapped in the EO. Okay, let's do one more question from Amanda.
My question is a little more general. I was wondering for kids who don't have necessarily, there's a lot of turnover in the situation they're in, home life is pretty unstable, kind of the maintenance of these skills across time after that, if there's not a lot of consistent adults in the kid's life.
I'll answer that, but we really need to talk about that later because we're just at cab 3 here, okay? But I'll answer it. Why not? Don't worry about everything you can't control. Okay, there's a little poem, I'm sure, in your grandma's house that's related to this. I don't know the exact words, but do not worry about the home life if you're working at school. Don't worry about what the teachers aren't doing when you're working in the home. Don't worry about the things you can't do anything about. Worry about the things you can do something about. Listen, until you can get perfect behavior in one little setting, we can't worry about getting it everywhere else. I'm not going to worry about who's not going to be able to do the treatment later. I need to worry about, can I get a beautiful repertoire first? Here's generally how the process works. If you want to convince a parent to do this treatment you developed at school and you want to kind of convince a parent to do it, we put the onus on us to develop a video of the child engaging in such an extraordinarily beautiful repertoire that when we show the parent, they're going to tear up and say, how did you do that? That's how we transfer treatment. And I don't worry about the parents' proclivities or what they can and can't do. I worry first about, let's get this repertoire built, and then we transfer and we deal with that problem as we get to it. But if you follow this process in that way, you'll have ammo, if you will, to move to the next level and get things going in the right direction. But please embrace this concept of not worrying about the other, but worrying more about what we can do in the situations that we have management of and create something beautiful there. And just don't sweat the other stuff until you've done that. Okay? Okay. Cab 4. Cab 1 is just one activity. So in this case, I was just doing color matching, let's say. At Cab 4, we still keep the requirement at 1 to 3, but we introduce other academic activities in this situation. So it might be matching, it might be object imitation, and it might be facial imitation. 3 different activities or programs. Okay, Cab 5. Cab 5 is where we stretch the chain, meaning we require more responses. So we went from 1, 2, or 3 to satisfy the reinforcement criteria. We might then go 1, 3, 5. 1, 3, 5, 7. What we're trying to do is make indiscernible changes in the requirement so problem behavior doesn't resurge. I like to call this, get my time right, it's not totally applicable, but it's fun, so let's do it anyway. I like to call this phase stealing their liquor. Say it just like that too, please. Stealing their liquor. That's what we're doing right now. So, some of you are so young, you probably remember this vividly because it was like last year where you were doing this. But how many people used to steal liquor from their parents' liquor cabinet? Raise your hands. Good, thank you. We got one shot up over there. She's very proud of that. Very good. Now, when you stole liquor from your family, you probably used the tactic of taking just a little bit so it was not detectable. And if your parents didn't drink, you probably threw water in it, which is not the best. Don't put the water in. Don't ruin a beautiful bottle of liquor, okay? But nevertheless, you took small amounts. And what we're doing right here is kind of the opposite. We're adding it in small amounts. It should be non-detectable. So if your learner is super sensitive, especially kids that can count, and you're doing 1, 2, 3, don't think the first transition to 1, 3, 5, they're not going to go 5. So you have to mask it. If they're going to be counting, then you want to maybe do open-ended activities that's based more on the amount of time they're performing. Do you see what I mean? The changes should not be detectable early in the process. Slowly bring them along.